for young people who are listening, but really for anyone who wants to keep growing, to think about the idea not just of, investments in philanthropy as an external thing, but really the calling to keep investing in ourselves.
I'm super excited for today's podcast. We went ahead and covered all 5 of the pillars of the generous girl on this podcast. You'll hear faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendship from Kate Gardner, who has a wealth of wisdom at her young age of 30 years old. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the Generous Girl podcast. I am thrilled today to have a special guest, Kate Gardner, with us. Kate is 30 years old and graduated from Princeton in 2016. And she chose to embrace an early inheritance that was passed down to her when she was 21, and thus began the journey of embarking upon becoming a giver, an investor, and a community developer in the family office space. So today we're going to do something unique. Usually on the Generous Girl podcast, we will talk about 2 of the 5 pillars, which is the faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendship. But today we're going to look at all 5 because we have a variety of ages and stages of life of women who listen to this podcast. And I thought it would be really helpful and fascinating to hear from Kate, a millennial. How is she looking at these 5 areas? And what are her strategies? What are her focuses to lead a balanced life that is pleasing to the Lord and a generous life? So welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much, Kim. It is such an honor to be here.
Such an honor to have you. And I would love for you to just unpack a little bit of the very brief bio that I shared about being at Princeton, your dad's decision, your parents' decision to gift you with stock, and how that affected you as a college student.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really do love looking back over my life and journey with generosity very much as a reflection on legacy and the concept of how what we do and the choices we make build upon previous generations. And so I'm really blessed that on both my parents' side, there were multiple forms of legacy, both on a faith level, I'd say most importantly, and a really strong sense of values like giving, like character, living lives of service and impact for others, as well as the financial legacy itself, and multiple ways that my family grew up with abundance, but were able to also maintain a posture of groundedness, of humility, and really wanting us as kids to go forth into our dreams and giftings that God had given us. And so with that, in college, I was really blessed again by this combination of being on my own for the first time, obviously in those, 18 to 22-year-old years, really establishing my faith personally in a way that solidified that this is who I am as a young adult. I was really blown away by the Christian community I found in college, just amazing friends I continue to walk with to this day, as well as when the financial legacy was passed down to me, a sense that this was ultimately from the Lord and was going to now become a part of my obedience and my life served for his purposes. And there were lots of nuances of how I processed that in the years to come and what I've now done in my 20s. But that whole season for me was one where a lot of foundations were laid, and I was able to really start thinking on a bigger scale of a more unique journey that I was going to go on with stewardship.
You just made me think of when you were at Princeton, did you have anyone who discipled you?
Yes, absolutely. I was part of a fantastic local church, as well as multiple campus ministry groups. So God, as I say, really blew me away with who I was able to walk with. And it was a journey. I mean, obviously, Princeton has become a very multifaceted place in terms of the values and faiths represented. But for me, there was such a foundation and a real radical nature, actually, to the type of people and focus on ministry that I started to step into.
I can so resonate with that because I also went to a college that was non-faith based, UCLA, but did find
Nice.
a really strong Christian community there at UCLA. And that is where Cru was founded. And so all these years later, just kind of that remnant of incredible people. Two of our kids went there, and all the years later that they were there found the same thing. And I'm just grateful for the people who were in those various campus ministries who gave their lives to pour into students, and the legacy you're mentioning, the generation after generation, it's very powerful. And those years in college, as you know, you are individuating from your parents, from the faith, the family that you were raised in, and figuring out what do I believe about these things that I've been taught since I was born. And it's just so helpful and wonderful to have those strong ministries leaders on campus. And I look at this stage of life and still get together with all the college buddies and friends, and we marveled at what God did then. And then I marvel at the legacy, these kids that I was with and what they've done with their lives. And I just think it's really neat that your dad then chose to entrust you with this money while you were still in your 20s, versus waiting till you were 40 or that. And that had to have, getting that gift along with your faith, as that was all melding and growing together, I'm sure really influenced your trajectory, and obviously your 20s and now going into your 30s.
Absolutely. Yes. I am so grateful looking back. I mean, one of the things I've become very passionate about is helping people, especially in this next gen space. So thinking about children of family business families that steward wealth generally. And there's so many sides to it. And there is a sense of a great scripture, of course, to whom much is given, much is required.
Mm-hmm.
And a real conviction that there's a weightiness to it, or I like the word a lot, a complexity to being someone called to steward wealth. And I've wrestled with it. I mean, it's definitely been unexpected in terms of even, having the opportunities I've had in my 20s and not having many peers who were in a similar boat. But it's something that I am so passionate about now, because I do feel like it's helped me actually refine my sense of faith, calling, ownership of my life as a young person. So that's why I love talking about it too.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, one other question before we jump into the 5 pillars is, can you share any practical things that your parents did when you were little with your siblings and how they encouraged generosity?
Yes. So one of my favorite stories, it was very simple, but it's actually something I've thought about a ton as almost, as I'd say, prophetic for the life I've gone on to live, was sitting in church growing up, having the offering bin passed around, and my parents very specifically giving the kids the money to put in the offering. And there was something about that where there was that empowerment. Obviously, it was very simple, and it was all their money. But now, again, looking back and saying, okay, since my family has chosen to give me resources as a young person, that is now this pattern that I've stepped into, is seeing this kind of form of financial legacy continually given back to the Lord. So even little things like that are favorite practices looking back. Another was definitely travel, and exposing my siblings and I to different parts of the world, going on mission trips or service oriented opportunities. I think just having my eyes open as someone who's obviously from the United States and a place of abundance, that was so huge to me, just seeing that there was so much more out there for me to get involved in.
Oh, I so resonate with that. And at one point, my husband was the CEO for North America for what's called Open Doors, if you know Brother Andrew and his book, God's Smuggler. So when he took that job, we knew it would involve a lot of international travel, and our kids were probably ages like 3 to 9 or 10. And so one of the things that was agreed upon with him taking that job that we asked for was, can we bring the family on at least on one trip a year? And it's probably 75% of the time it was international, but the other time it was within the States. And it was such a pivotal choice to do that, because they would look forward to, where are we going this year? One year we went to China with the 2008 Olympics, and, went to this orphanage where the people, they like to, have everything look lovely on the outside, but these were the kind of the children that they felt were the ones that were not wanted, and whether they were burn victims or cerebral palsy. It was just this little orphanage, and we were able to take the kids there, and we got there, and it was really transformative for the kids to hold the children, to be there and not just hear about what their dad would experience traveling. And as a parent, you can talk about all of this forever, but when the kids themselves experience it and see it, it becomes a part of their DNA. And just like you said, I mean, we are all so blessed in the United States, and most of the world does not live like the United States. And as a result, we do have this very strong charge for all of us of how do we give back to those around the world. And maybe it's not money, but maybe it's our time, our talents, and volunteering, etc. So yes, big believer in global travel and doing whatever we can to get the kids overseas to see how most of the world lives. So, okay, so let us jump into the 5 pillars so we have enough time to touch on everyone. And you've touched upon faith, so why don't we finish that one out? But you were mentioning in our pre-conversation the importance of prayer, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So, looking back even over my personal testimony, the centrality of prayer has really continued to, I think, help me focus on my personal relationship with God. Of course, I am very passionate about the local church, Christian nonprofit organization, so much of what I do in stewardship now. But I think I was really grateful looking back, especially starting in high school, that through some extended family members, people I consider spiritual parents in my life, that I was brought into this sense. I love referencing the scripture that we taste and see that the Lord is good.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that we can truly have an experiential relationship with God. And for me, it was really having these senses that God could come into a moment of prayer and refresh me, encourage me, speak to me, ground me, all the things that are a part of who God and Jesus is for us biblically, to really know that myself. And I think that was part of why going to college, I was already primed to have that be such a focus for individuation, as you said, and who I would become as a young adult. So with that, I also have just really enjoyed in my 20s being a part of a lot of communities that focus on that personal seeking of the Lord, whether also through forms of worship and, of course, community building. And so one of the things I've really enjoyed getting to kind of bring, actually even alongside of my generosity, is a focus on checking in with organizations, actually both nonprofit and for-profit, about their efforts around prayer. And especially those of us who are going to claim that we are doing our work for the Lord, how can we really create that experience of God being at the center? And again, I think that's why prayer in my personal faith walk, and then again, now what I do with my time, has continued to be a pillar. And whether it's prayer calls for a startup is getting off the ground and asking the Lord to lead, or whether it's, of course, close friends of mine, just praying for each other's hearts and journeys. That's one of my favorite things that I try to fill my life with.
Well, that's beautiful, because obviously prayer reflects that we're not in charge. Someone else is. And we don't want our will, but we want His will to be done. But prayer does take time. It takes listening. It takes devotion. It takes discipline. But it's the foundation. And we can build it on our own thoughts and wisdom and all that, but it only goes so far, as we know. And I think that's beautiful to really, truly show in your life that is important to you, and you're weaving that into these relationships. So one thing we had talked about earlier, but not yet on the podcast, is explain how a lot of your time now is devoted to you've been very generous to these various nonprofits, but you didn't want to just write the check. You wanted to also be there walking with them. So tell us a little bit how you do that, because I think that's helpful for the listener who might be passionate about a couple of nonprofits herself, or maybe very new to giving. But I like how you build the relationship and it's not just transactional.
Yes, absolutely. I really love thinking about giving, like you're saying. And again, it doesn't even matter really the financial amount, but just this way of living as one that is holistic and one where we can truly try to champion, again, what God is doing in these different individuals and organizations that we give to. One of my favorite quick literary facts is actually about the root word of invest, a financial word that if you go to the Latin basis, it's actually the word investire, which means to put on the clothes of. And it's the same word as vestments, like the garments that priests wear. And this is actually a teaching that my dad passed down to me, that if we're truly investing in something, it's almost like we're embodying, or to use spiritual language, that we're being incarnational with the way that we go about that investment. So obviously I could reference this a bit more with the financial side of things too, but even with this prayer focus and this kind of relational giving, I've thought about that a ton, that, you know, the way I want to go about getting involved in various nonprofits really is about putting my whole self out there. And again, for me, with my faith and my focus on personal prayer, that's looked like, okay, as a giver, you know, getting involved. I think of an example with a fantastic anti-trafficking group I love walking with. I was very proactive, even in just getting to know them, asking them, hey, do you all pray for your work together? And turns out this organization had a prayer call that they had been doing monthly. And so I was able to get involved in that. And now that's been a community in my life, which is such a fun way to see generosity as well. Yeah, that it could be such a blessing mutually. And so that's one example that has really stuck throughout the years. Another is that I really love to support individuals. You referenced earlier, you know, campus ministers or people like that. One of my personal focuses specifically with my giving has been on missionaries. And what that's allowed is that as I've gotten in touch with people, I can say to them, hey, I want to not only, you know, write you a monthly check, but I want to pray for you and with you. And so I had a season a couple years ago where I was literally doing, I think it was like on average 10 prayer calls a day.
Wow.
Because I built again, this is like me kind of putting a very unique vocation together. But, you know, I was able to just say, hey, I'm here to check in with you. Like, I'm not only going to give you, you know, this amount, but I actually proactively want to be involved. Now, obviously, I had the time to do that. Sure. I'm sure many listeners wouldn't. But even just that expression of saying, hey, you know, hey, missionary on this campus, text me. Like, if you're just having a bad day and you just need prayer, I want to be here for you. So just, I think that posture, again, that kind of incarnational sense and really bringing what joy you have as a giver to the table, I think could be really fun.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Kate, because truly when someone is with a missionary organization, taking those massive steps of faith, raising support, moving to a place possibly where they don't know the language, it can feel very lonely. And knowing that someone in the States is not only a financial supporter, but really in their corner and really lifting their requests up to the Lord is so, so powerful. So thanks for your generosity in that regard. That is really beautiful. So we touched on faith. Now let's move to finances. And I know you had mentioned in our conversation earlier, kind of building this team around you. So from a practical standpoint, the woman's listening and, you know, maybe she's done the finances herself. Maybe she's right out of college and this is all new and kind of transitioning to how do I do #adulting like my own children. But maybe it's someone who's listening who is much further down the road, or maybe their husband's done this all these years. Maybe they're now a widow. We have all kinds of women who listen to this podcast. So from your vantage point, who would be those people that you feel are in your corner on your financial team?
Yes. I am so grateful for the journey that I've been on in that area. And it is something that I would encourage all listeners, regardless again of what size portfolio you have, or what stage of life you're in, to assemble a team. I think especially for us women, there is such a sense, at least that I've gotten, I'll speak for myself, of support and feeling seen and encouraged in this area personally.
Yes.
That has meant the world to me. So I actually went on a journey a couple of years ago to find my own personal advisor. And it was something, again, that I really focused on. So I reached out to, I think, about 8 firms and had all these introductory calls. And honestly, one of my things looking back on that season 2 was that I learned a ton.
Absolutely.
I saw that there was so many different philosophies out there about investing and stewardship in general. And so, yeah, I'm a huge fan even of, these days, Googling things and just, exploring and seeing. So it's definitely something that I would encourage people, or obviously asking for referrals of friends who we know have great advisors. So doing that was huge for me to really, again, keep building the sense of ownership of my own finances personally. And I've worked with multiple teams now. And I think, again, definitely having, accountants in the picture so that I don't have this fear around taxes and strategies there, as well as having an advisory team that really kind of operate in my life as a multi-family office in a small way, that I'm able to really look to, even if, like, they're so kind to me, if my car breaks down or if I have a home project that I want to finance, they've been able to just really be there. And again, I think going on a journey to explore different options and really just seeing, who are the people that you resonate with can be a really great way to find that sense of stability. I remember that. I mean, especially in my unique circumstance with inheritance, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like I didn't know what to do and what different decisions would mean. So taking the initiative and going for it, or maybe, your husband or your family already have an advisor, I would encourage people to get to know that person and that team personally, to, again, make it a relationship, that it doesn't just have to be someone you sign checks for to keep things safe. But again, with that orientation toward, hey, I want to know, as a steward under the Lord, I want to be involved in this side of my life, is something I really encourage.
Yes, I think it's very empowering. And I think in any category, sometimes when we're not getting the results we want, we need to hire the expert. So whatever that is. And sometimes there's a stigma about not doing that, or why do you need that? But, many professions, they are the experts. And just like you said, they want to come alongside you, to come alongside us, and allow them to do what they're good at, allow us to do what we're good at, so that we don't have to panic and worry at, tax time. My dad passed away last fall. And so I now am the trustee and I did all the taxes for my mom who's still alive, her estate. But even that whole world of, like, my dad had all these different advisors where they live in another state, and time consuming, but wondering, is that the best team now for the season that we're in? And, when we talk about the great wealth transfer and so much money being passed on to women, just like, my mom happened before my eyes, a lot of times the women come in and they don't have that relationship with the advisor, and they will quickly find a new person because we're so relational. So I think it's nice to start early in that and be a part of the discussions. If you're married and your husband, you're used to having him do the finances, go to the meeting, the semi-annual or the annual meeting, and hear what's happening. And maybe you won't understand all the terms, but that's totally fine. But what about the giving side of things? Like, understand, what is our family budget? What do we have to give? And how can we steward this? And then could we possibly even increase our giving next year by 1%? And that's just a fun challenge goal to watch how God can provide, and you can never outgive God. So I love to hear just the fact that you interviewed 8 different firms. And one of the podcasts we released not that long ago was all about impact investing. And this is a whole area for everybody to understand. And some people are much further ahead of understanding, what is my portfolio invested in? And I encourage everyone to look into that, to know where, your money is being invested, because that matters also. So there's a lot. There's always so many things that we can all, focus on, and we all have such busy lives. But one of the goals from this podcast is to the listener, like, listen to Kate's story, hear these 5 pillars, and focus on one of them and think, wow, I love that idea. I'm going to apply that in my own life. That would be the takeaway from today. Okay, so we've done faith, we've done finances. So how about friendship?
Yes. So friendship has become such a huge focus of my life in my 20s. It is something I think that our modern world allows us, but also, the challenge to really hone in on who are the people that we want to do life with. One of my favorite things, especially we were referencing earlier, keeping up with people from college, there is such capacity to stay in touch,
yes,
like never before
right.
in our world. But then also, having a longing for depth. And one of my favorite phrases in my life has become having spiritual family. Mm-hmm. This idea that I want to have this core group. For me right now, it's been sisters in Christ who are truly there for me, are like a rock and a very life-giving foundation for community. And I have been blown away by that. And really, even again, in my stewardship, having this sense that I want to be someone who is supporting my friends mm-hmm. and is willing to kind of lean into what I like to even call relational generosity. One of my favorite, very practical ways of doing that has been realizing that I actually have a lot, for whatever reason, of female friends who are entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And I've really loved getting to lean into helping encourage them. Part of that is just my personality and my joy and trying to cheerlead other people. But also, having that mindset of, I like, especially my friends who are going for incredible ways of living their life for the Lord, uniquely or creatively. How can I be there for them? And I always think of one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, John 15:13, that says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down their life for their friends. Mm-hmm. And that's really become an anthem for me of the type of, in a sense, legacy that I want to leave personally, is really a marker on my friends' lives.
Well, that reminds me of the birthday party you told me about. Share about that, because I love that. And we found that we had mutual friends who were at the birthday party.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really fun thing for me to process recently. So for my turning 30, actually within this month of May, I was able to put on a huge event where I featured a nonprofit, actually one of my favorites in this Christian generosity space, called Gospel Patrons, that help people understand mm-hmm. the calling as people of stewardship to support people in ministry full time. And so anyways, I was able to invite just the network of friends that I'd built in my 20s to come. And yes, it was the most fun. I, as an extrovert, but also as someone who just so delights in trying to create atmospheres mm-hmm. of joy and connection. It was definitely a highlight of my year, if not many years to come. And one other aspect of that I'll highlight briefly is also hospitality. Mm-hmm. And that's actually been one of my favorite forms of what I see as my creative stewardship as well in the last few years. I bought a larger home, actually pretty purely for the purpose of being able to host more people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that is a form of both ministry and generosity that has gone so much further than I even expected that it would, to the level that people have joked that I've run a hotel for Jesus in the last few years. But I have had so much fun with that too. And again, I think just this manifestation of life in community mm-hmm. is something that I just feel so passionately about, because I think it's what we're truly made for in the Lord.
Yes, I so agree. And I love hospitality also, so I can really resonate with that. And in fact, that reminds me, I saw yesterday on, I think it was Instagram, this woman posted this post of, like, the husband said, keep it simple. Just beer and chips is fine. Don't go crazy. Yes. And then she showed the picture of just the flowers and the candles, and, it was absolutely beautiful. That. But there's power in using our spaces, our homes, our apartments, wherever we are, and creating that beauty as a place for people to gather. And I love that you featured gospel patrons. We just held 2 events here in Southern California. So this podcast is called Generous Girl, but those events were called Generous Girls, one in Orange County, one in San Diego. And we featured a speaker, actually Donna Jones. She's been on a previous podcast. She's an author. And then we had a gal from Generous Giving speak, and she talked about just like an 8-minute generosity testimonial. And it was loveliness, great food, and shout out to Sarah, who's on our team, who just did a beautiful job with everything. But we had just these beautiful charcuterie boards. And really, what was the purpose? The purpose was to get these amazing women together, kingdom-minded women in Orange County and San Diego, and have a space for conversations about generosity and be inspired by hearing Donna's message, and then have time to share in small groups afterwards. So we're hoping that this concept can go kind of across the country with the National Christian Foundation because of the power of community. And NCF does often play that role in communities of catalyzing the generosity and the people that are, passionate about this. So it was very, very fun. And one other hospitality thing that came to mind when you were talking, I thought I would share, is when my kids were little, you did your birthday party, but it was also a strategic birthday party. You had these incredible people there, and then you had a speaker and just encouraging everyone on their own path. So we did the same thing with a mother-daughter cookie exchange. So we had 100 people that would come at Christmas to our house, and mother-daughters, and then we had a speaker. And it was like helping the little girls, like no one could wear jeans. It was actually dress up in California, which is rare. And then just, look however you want to look in your Christmas clothing, and then encourage, manners, conversation, or whatever it was that we were targeting and focused on. But we did it for like 10 years, and it was really, really fun. Wow. And I love the hospitality side. So I love that God provided a home for you in Nashville that is big enough to have a lot of people there. So that's wonderful. I think I just keep hearing in your stories of, it's so beautiful how you've learned at such a young age, like what your gifts are, what you're passionate about, what you want to lean into. And I just encourage the listener to continue down their own path of figuring out what those things are, so you can live kind of the most beautiful, fullest life possible.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So now transitioning into family. Anything else? I know we talked about, how things your parents did when you were little. Anything else in this stage of life from that pillar that you want to call out?
Yes. One of the things I really have gotten passionate about sharing is this multi-generational stewardship piece. And it's something that, as we've been saying, listeners, I'm sure, are going to be all over the place in terms of where they are with both finances as well as family. But something that I'm really grateful about, and have kind of tried to share more broadly now with my story, is that confidence that I want to give, especially to parents and to wealth creators who might be thinking about passing down money to the next generation, that I feel like in this area of family wealth, there can be so much fear and so much concern that giving money to kids can ruin them. And obviously there are, unfortunately, so many examples in our culture that prove that out. And I do think that it is something to have a real fear of the Lord about. But something that I have really wanted to, in essence, share and walk out with my own life, is that actually allowing for family stewardship to flow even in earlier years of life, like in my case at 21, can actually go on to help people in their walk with God, as well as in their vocation and serving the Lord. And that is something that, especially, in these earlier years, as you referenced, Kim, a lot of thinking around family wealth gets put to when, kids are 40 or when they're, much older. But the kind of sad aspect of that I've thought a lot about is those actually aren't the years that you could do as much with money. Like, it's actually been me in my 20s, getting to establish my own rhythms of giving. I have a donor advised fund that I love using monthly as a main way to support all of, the missionaries and organizations that I'm passionate about. So seeing money as actually a channel by which people can grow and become the fullness of who God's called them to be, rather than this thing that needs to be held back, that needs to be secret until, a certain moment where actually maybe the kids either can't use it as much, or they haven't actually built the rhythms of faithfulness over years, including when they're younger, to want to lean in those areas. So that's just one of the ways of thinking about family wealth transfer that I love sharing with people.
Oh, thank you. I think that's wonderful. I've also heard from the side when kids grow up and they're, say, in an environment where, almost you hear the successful dad syndrome kind of thing, made all the money, and the child doesn't know his or her place in that system going forward, that has, like, on the flip side of what you just said, they don't know their identity. They don't know where they fit in the family going forward. And I think you're absolutely right. The more those conversations can be had, and that child in that situation can understand the pivotal role they play in that legacy of that family going forward. It might look very different, obviously, than the parent and their gifts and their calling, but it is understanding, what have we been entrusted with as a family? What will be given to me as the child? And then what am I to do with that, with my own shape, as we used to say at Saddleback, our spiritual gifts, our heart, our ability, our personality, and experiences. So, okay, great. So good, Kate. And finally, then, fitness. So, as I've said on the podcast before, it doesn't have to be physical, although we've had some great guests regarding the physical fitness side of things, but it can be emotional fitness. What would you like to say about our final pillar with fitness?
I love it. I love that you have one of these, the fitness focus here. And I love what you just said, that it is truly a holistic way of thinking about our lives and our health. Two quick encouragements I love to share with people. One is to really, especially maybe for young people who are listening, but really for anyone who wants to keep growing, to think about the idea not just of investments in philanthropy as an external thing, but really the calling to keep investing in ourselves. And one of the main ways, you reference emotional fitness, that I've tried to do that is actually to have a real focus in my life, especially in the last few years, on hiring coaches and therapists around me. And it's something that I cannot recommend highly enough, because I think, especially as someone who seeks, to be earnest in my faithfulness to God and my external ministry to people, I really have honestly felt like God has convicted me in the last few years that I need to make sure that I am growing personally in Him at the greatest possible extent. And part of that has been choosing to actually use my financial resource to do that. And I've joked, especially in the last year, that I'm basically paying tuition to all of these coach people as my personal school of life. But it's really, as I would say, financially speaking, paid dividends in my own sense of growth and who I am. So that would definitely be a main encouragement. On more of the physical fitness side, one thing I just love sharing about is another practice around both prayer and ministry that I've loved, which is actually to cultivate a prayer list that I actually pair with my generosity. So thinking about who are, missionaries I support, organizations I walk with, churches that I love. And what I've been able to do is, and that I should reference, this has been inspired by an author named George Mueller, and a personal practice that he had to craft a prayer list, a daily intercessory list that I then go on a walk and pray over. And I try to do so every day. And it's become basically, people who know me in my daily life, well, this is like the stalwart part of my day is, when is my prayer walk going to happen? And I've had so much fun with it. And honestly, usually I try to do it out in creation, and even just 20-30 minutes. It is just so refreshing for me, both giving me, a bit of that just, walk, physical fitness, but also that spiritual practice, again, of praying in alignment with generosity and with just people I care about in my life. So it's something I've hope to want to spread as an idea to others as well.
So good. So good. I really am a firm believer as well about, if you know the author Pete Scazzaro, Emotionally Healthy Church.
Yes.
And his premise is basically you cannot be spiritually mature unless you are emotionally healthy. And just the individual quest that each of us have to become that emotionally healthy person and to understand our own backgrounds and current situation, relationships, to be the most healthy version of ourselves. And it's a lifelong process for sure, but a very worthy quest to all be working on. You know, it's the opposite of saying, well, that's just how I am, or that's just how I was born, that's just the family I came from. No, it's like we all have this ability to be the best versions of ourselves with all the different things we've all been kind of the hand of cards we've been dealt, the experiences, good and bad, that have happened to us, and then how we understand how the Lord has allowed those experiences into our lives, and then what does he desire for us to do with them to be, you know, the most generous person that we can be as his steward here on this earth. So, that's fun. I like this little format of doing all 5 of the pillars. I'm glad that we went that route. Okay. So at the end, I always love to wrap up with our, favorite Bible verse, current book we're reading, and then a bargain. Is there anything else before we get to that part? Any other thought you want to share with the listener, or any other story that's come to mind that maybe you feel?
Sure. Yes, this has been so fun, Kim. I'm so honored to have been your guinea pig, shall I say, in all 5 of the pillars. I love the diversity of topics. I think one thing, especially just thinking, of course, about the name of this podcast, Generous Girl, I just really want to encourage all the listeners here to feel empowered in their calling to give. And I think specifically as women, we are wired to be encouragers, champions. And there's such a sweet spot that I feel like God has given us to lean in and to feel like we can really run with our personalities, our wirings, alongside of financial stewardship. I think, again, it's something that, even as we were talking earlier with hospitality or with relational giving, that is actually, I would even call it kind of undiscovered territory, that there's so much more in this area. So one of the things I hope and pray for listeners is just feeling excited. Another thing I just love to leave with people is this sense of joy. I mean, that is why I've chosen to live the life I have in my 20s, is because of the amount of just honestly giddiness that I get from getting to focus on giving, and the way that, again, it has refined me. It's also challenged me. It's been such a place of knowing God more in my life. And there's many sides of, again, kind of the questions around how do you discover what you're passionate about giving and all of that. But I just hope and pray, again, that listeners feel urged on in considering this area of their lives.
Oh, that's beautiful, Kate. I was with someone yesterday, and he talked about making a donation to this organization, but it wasn't very much, dollars wise. And the head person of the organization called him to say, thank you so much. That's incredible what you gave us. Good. And this donor realized, wow, like even that little bit that I gave made such a difference to this. It was like a skeleton budget that they were working on. So I think sometimes we think, if I don't have the millions to give and I'm only giving this amount, does it really make a difference? But 100%, it makes a huge, huge difference, whether it's $1 or it's, $1 billion that someone is giving. And it's how you're led and directed by the Lord to give. Because if your heart is beating for this organization, maybe in your local town, or it's a national organization or a global organization to give to, then God's probably giving you the resources because he wants you to be that one to bless that organization. And if you choose not to do it, he's still going to bless that organization. It's just somebody else will get that blessing of being able to be the giver and the donor to that organization. Oh, so fun. Okay, well, it always makes me a little sad when we're at the end. But go ahead and share your favorite Bible verse.
Yes. Well, I've already referenced one, I guess, so maybe I'll throw in a second. In addition to John 15:13 about laying down our lives for our friends, I really love Jeremiah 29:13, another that I've claimed for my life, which is that you will find God when you seek him with all your heart, would be one paraphrase. And again, I loved, Kim, just getting to talk with you even today about prayer specifically. And I think I would just encourage listeners to, as always, just keep the focus on knowing God. And again, the promise of Jeremiah 29:13 is that we will find him when we come with that place of our whole hearts being engaged. And, another that I'll just keep throwing out there now is a classic, of course, John 3:16.
Sure.
That God so loved the world that he gave his only son.
Yes.
That whoever would believe in him would not perish but have eternal life. And again, I think the way I've been able to reflect in my 20s on this combination of the posture of God as the generous father, as the one who gives life, gives all good things to us. And then we as his stewards, we as those who through having a personal relationship with him, and then also through becoming givers ourselves, that there's so much of his presence and of feeling that fulfillment in him far beyond, a career or a relationship or things like that I've just become so passionate about.
Oh, and you can tell. I love the joy that you radiate. And it's so true. I mean, as stewards, it doesn't matter whatever each of us have been entrusted with. It doesn't matter the amount. It just it matters our faithfulness, so that when we stand before him and he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. I love what you did with what I gave you. And look at this result. And look at this person whose life was touched." And all of that in heaven is just going to be unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. Okay. What about a current book that you're reading?
Yes. Well, one I've actually just really enjoyed sharing with people is new, and it's called Lead with Prayer. And it's by Peter Greer, Cameron Doolittle, and Ryan Skoog, I believe. They wrote it together. A bunch of names in this kind of Christian generosity space, all amazing people. And obviously, still on that theme right now of, even those individuals, the authors in organizations, how do we have lifestyles of focusing on, again, prayer being a pillar and a focus every day. So that's the main book I feel like I'm championing a lot right now.
Oh, no, that's great. I was at a luncheon in Orange County a couple months ago, and Peter Greer was there talking about his newest book. And
good.
Exactly. Wonderful. Okay. And finally, your favorite recent bargain, I should say.
Yes. And remind me, the bargain is the language
around. It could be
anything.
It could just be you were on Anthropology and they had a sale. So it's to help someone who's listening right now to think, okay, never thought I could go get the Athleta pants at the store or whatever.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That makes me so happy as a question. This one might sound a little funny, but I have become such a fan of basics on Amazon. And what I mean by that is actually something I'm wearing right now. I found these jumpsuits and rompers that are so comfortable.
See,
and I can buy them in so many colors. Perfect work from home attire. Right. If you look up Amazon women's jumpsuits, I am the biggest fan. It's a typical day in the life right now.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, for all of us who are at home and on Zoom, a lovely, lovely suggestion. Well, Kate, you're the best. And I can't wait to meet you in person someday. And I know it'll happen. And thank you. Just thank you for living such a generous life. You have so much wisdom at your young age. And I love how you're devoting your life to sharing that wisdom through experiences, but practical ways. You're blessing these nonprofits, and it's all bathed in prayer. So beautiful. And I think the Lord is just smiling on your life and what you're doing, with what he's given you. So thanks for encouraging all of us. And my hope, as I said earlier, is that each listener, when we hear your story, we take that next step in our own lives. And I think one takeaway for me is related to the George Mueller side of things and getting a little more tactical with my prayer list in one place, like you said, each day, that having that list. So that'll be my takeaway. So
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kim. Again, it has been such an honor and joy to be with you today. I just really look up to what you're doing. And thank you for creating this platform where women can feel seen and met and urged on to live a life of generosity, of taking initiative with stewardship, and living a life for the Lord. So it's just been so amazing getting to know you and seeing the fruit of this all around.
Well, thank you so much. Just such a blessing. So God bless, and until the next time.
Thank you. Same.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.